There are only 14 mountains on Earth which rise above 8,000 meters. At that height, the body can no longer properly acclimatise. There is so little available oxygen in the air that however fit somebody is, their body gets weaker. Climbers call it the death zone, and an expedition to just one of these mountains can take weeks, if not months, and cost tens of thousands of dollars. For a long time, completing all 14 was the work of an entire mountaineering career. In fact, only about 50 people in history have done it. Before 2019, the quickest anyone had managed it was 7 years, 10 months and 6 days. Nirmal Nims Purja gave himself and his team 7 months. He finished in just 189 days. The crazy part is, 7 years earlier, Nims had never even wore crampons. He was 29 with a career in the British military when a trek towards Everest Base Camp led him onto his first summit. From there, everything changed. Project Possible would take him from the special boat service, cost him the pension he was working towards, and force him to remortgage his home. It would also produce rescues high in the death zone, one of the most famous photographs ever taken on Everest, and an arrival at K2 just as other expeditions were preparing to leave. The completion speed and following Netflix documentary brought Nims worldwide attention, and he used that attention to put Nepali climbers, including the team around him, in front of the camera and into a part of mountaineering history where they had too often been left unnamed. Tragically, however, on the 30th of July 2026, Nims, alongside 9 other climbers, died in an avalanche on Broad Peak. He was just 43. This video is going to honour Nims and show you how he went from his first climb at 29 to all 14 of the world's highest mountains in a single season, and why the 189 days became only one part of his influence on the mountaineering world. Before going back to the start of his climbing career, I want to briefly address why I'm making this video now. On the morning of the 30th of July, a 10-person international team was climbing between Camp 2 and Camp 3 on Broad Peak. The group was caught in an avalanche and all 10 climbers were killed. Whilst this video focuses specifically on Nims, 9 other families lost somebody on the mountain that day. The climbers came from Nepal, Oman, Pakistan, China, the United States and the United Kingdom. Poor weather and the terrain have made the recovery work extremely difficult. The full circumstances of exactly what happened are still being established, so I don't want to speculate about what happened. The rest of this video will stay with the life and climbing career of Nims that is properly documented, but I wanted to honour all 10 souls lost on Broad Peak that day. Nims was often known as Nimsdai. Dai is a respectful Nepali term for older brother, and it followed him from the military to the mountains. Nims was born in 1983 in Dana, a village in Nepal's Magdi district near the Dhaulagiri Massif. When he was 4, his family moved south to the much flatter district of Chitwan. They had very little money, and the mountains weren't a part of his childhood like many people assume that they were. His father and older brothers had all served as Gurkha soldiers, and Nims wanted to follow them. So in 2003, he joined the Brigade of Gurkhas in the British Army. 6 years later, he became the first Gurkha accepted into the Special Boat Service, the Royal Navy's equivalent of the SAS. He would eventually spend 16 years in the British military, including 10 in the Special Forces. Mountains entered his life during a period of leave in 2012. Nims had become used to people hearing that he's from Nepal and asking him if he'd climbed Everest, and he hadn't. So aged 29, he went on a trek towards Everest Base Camp. On the way, he saw Amadablam, a steep pyramid of rock and ice that is considered one of the most beautiful mountains in the Himalayas. He asked his guide whether they could climb it, and quite reasonably, his guide said Amadablam was out of the question. It's a serious technical climb, and Nims had no mountaineering experience. Instead, they settled on Le Boucher East, a 6,119 metre peak nearby. According to Nims, he learned how to use crampons on a patch of grass before climbing the mountain. That first summit changed the direction of his life. 2 years later, he climbed Dhaulagiri, the 7th highest mountain on Earth, and his first above 8,000 metres. It was there where he realised he could operate unusually well at altitude. He acclimatised quickly and recovered faster than many climbers. Years in the military had also made exhaustion, cold, and difficult decisions very familiar to him. In 2016, during leave, following a deployment to Afghanistan, he summited Everest for the first time. The following year, he led an expedition that put 13 serving Gurkhas on Everest summit to commemorate 200 years of Gurkha service in the British Army. He then returned to climb Everest, Lhotse and Makalu in 5 days, setting a speed record that he would later break himself. By 2018, Nims had been awarded an MBE for his work in high-altitude mountaineering. The military career he had spent most of his life building no longer left enough time for the mountains. He asked for leave to attempt the world's 5 highest peaks, and the request was denied as it was deemed too dangerous. So, Nims resigned. He left the Special Boat Service several years before qualifying for the full pension he had worked towards. Then he remortgaged his house for an idea that sounded considerably more dangerous than the one that had already been turned down. He searched for the fastest time anyone had climbed all 14 8,000 metre mountains. South Korea's Kim Chang-ho held the record at 7 years, 10 months and 6 days, completed without supplementary oxygen. Nims decided he could do it in 7 months. Most people he approached for funding didn't believe him. His planned budget was around £750,000, and when he began the first phase, he had only secured a fraction of it. People kept labelling the project as impossible, which gave him the perfect name: Project Possible. The calendar began with 6 mountains around Nepal in spring, 5 in Pakistan's Karakoram during summer, and ended with 3 across Nepal and Tibet in the autumn. Helicopters shortened some of the journeys between base camps, although the expedition still had to coordinate permits, oxygen, equipment, and people across 3 countries. A delay on one mountain could leave the next team waiting under completely different weather. Several Nepali climbers rotated through the project. Mingma David Sherpa and Jeljan Sherpa were central to the attempts, with Lak Padendi Sherpa, Geshman Tumong and others joining at different stages. Project Possible carried Nim's name, but the schedule relied on all of them. That became clear on the very first mountain when the team was drawn into a rescue. Project Possible officially began on Annapurna on the 23rd of April 2019. Annapurna is the 10th highest mountain in the world and has historically been one of the most deadly, with upper slopes exposed to avalanches and unstable snow. Unsurprisingly, Nims and his team reached the summit. As they returned to base camp, they learned that another climber, Malaysian anesthesiologist Woo Kin Chin, was missing high on the mountain. He had become separated from his group during the descent and spent around 40 hours at approximately 7,500 metres without bottled oxygen, food or water. A helicopter eventually spotted him moving. Nims and his team were dropped at Camp 3. They climbed back towards Chin, reached him and began the extremely difficult process of lowering him far enough for a helicopter evacuation. They got him off the mountain alive, but tragically his injuries were too severe and he died a few days later in hospital. 19 days after Annapurna, the team summited Dhaulagiri. 3 days after that, they reached the top of Kangchenjunga, the 3rd highest mountain on Earth, after a huge push lasting roughly 22 hours. They encountered climbers in serious trouble above 8,000 metres. Nims and his team gave away some of their own oxygen and spent hours trying to help, but tragically again, 2 of those climbers died. Nims later explained that using supplementary oxygen during Project Possible was partly about maintaining enough strength to respond when other people needed help. The use of oxygen matters when records are compared, but Nims was always very open about using it. 1 week after Kanchenjunga, the team moved on to Everest. Nims reached its summit early on the 22nd of May, descended towards the South Col, traversed Lhotse, and stood on the second summit of the day that afternoon. Then he travelled to Mukulu and climbed that as well. The 3 summits took 2 days and 30 minutes. Everest, Lhotse, and Mukulu are the 1st, 4th, and 5th highest mountains in the world. During the Everest climb, Nims also captured this photograph that would introduce his name to millions of people. A solid queue of climbers packed along the final ridge beneath the summit. It became the defining image of overcrowding on Everest. By the 24th of May, the team had completed 6 mountains in 1 month and 1 day. Nims still looked capable of continuing, but at this point the project didn't have enough funding for the next phase. The search for funding delayed the journey, and it cost the expedition valuable weeks. Fortunately, crowdfunding and new sponsorships eventually kept it moving. Nims reached Nanga Parbat on the 3rd of July, Gasherbrum 1 on the 15th, and Gasherbrum 2 3 days later. K2 was the point that could derail the entire project. And if you're unaware of K2, I'm sure these videos and images give you a sense of just how dangerous the mountain is. When Nims arrived at base camp, repeated avalanches and deep, unstable snow above the bottleneck had already forced teams to turn around. Some expeditions were preparing to leave the mountain completely. If K2 couldn't be climbed that season, the project was over. Nims and his team joined climbers from 7 summit treks. On the night of the 23rd of July, the fixing team left Camp 4 and began opening the route through the section that had stopped everyone else. They broke trail and fixed rope towards the summit for 8 hours. At 7:50 AM the following morning, Nims and the lead team stood on top of K2. Their work opened the route for climbers below them, and it's reported that around 30 people reached the summit of K2 that season. 2 days later, Nims climbed Broad Peak. He had now completed Pakistan's 5 8,000-metre mountains in 23 days, bringing the overall total to 11 mountains in 94 days. After completing the Pakistan phase, Nims returned to Kathmandu, where his mother had suffered a heart attack and was seriously ill. He spent time with her before preparing to leave for the final 3 mountains. After a break in the climbing calendar, Nims began the final phase on Cho Oyu, reaching its summit on the 23rd of September. 4 days later, he climbed Manaslu, mountain number 13. The final mountain, Shishupangma, had been closed by the Chinese authorities for the season, leaving the expedition dependent on a permit that did not yet exist. Nims began lobbying officials. The Nepali government approached China on his behalf, and after weeks of uncertainty, the team received the special permit that they needed. On the 29th of October 2019, Nims reached the summit of Shishupangma. Project Possible was complete. 14 mountains had taken 6 months and 6 days, 189 days in total. He had reduced the previous fastest time by more than 93%. Later research found that his Dhaulagiri and Manaslu ascents had stopped short of the points now recognised as their true summits, as many climbers had done without realising. Nims returned to both and completed the accepted summits by October 2021, giving him a revised official time of 2 years and 168 days. In 2023, Christian Harila and Tenjin Lama Sherpa completed all 14 true summits in 92 days. By then, Project Possible had already changed expectations of how quickly these 14 mountains can be linked together. By January 2021, 13 of the world's 14 8,000-metre mountains had been climbed during winter. K2 was the exception. Decades of expeditions had tried, and the previous winter high point was around 7,700 metres. Climbers from 3 separate Nepali expeditions joined together for one final push. Nims was one of the 10 climbers who reached the upper mountain. This time, he climbed it without supplementary oxygen. Close to the summit, the lead climbers stopped 10 metres below the top and waited for everyone else. They wanted the first winter ascent to belong to the whole group. All 10 Nepali climbers walked onto K2's summit together, shoulder to shoulder, singing Nepal's national anthem. In October 2024, he completed true summit ascents of all 14 8,000ers without supplementary oxygen in 2 years and 150 days, the official Guinness male record. Guinness also recorded him as the first person to climb the full set of 14 mountains twice. For generations, Nepali climbers had fixed routes and carried much of the risk on Himalayan expeditions, while the expedition leader or paying climber often became the name remembered by history. The K2 team made a deliberate decision to share that moment. Nims spoke about this throughout Project Possible. His team filmed their own climbs and named the people doing the work, presenting Nepali mountaineers to a wide audience as elite athletes in their own right. When 14 Peaks, Nothing is Impossible was released by Netflix in 2021, that argument reached an audience far beyond traditional mountaineering. Nims became what National Geographic later described as the first celebrity mountaineer of the streaming era. The film also helped popularise fast, multi-mountain expeditions. I personally made my first mountain video, which was about K2, because I saw Nims' documentary on Netflix. He was the reason that I got into mountaineering. Elite Exped, the company Nims built with other Nepali climbers, began guiding clients through the kind of rapid sequences Project Possible had pioneered. In 2022, he established the Nimsdai Foundation, which has supported mountain cleanups, education, disaster relief, and projects in Himalayan communities. The following year, Loughborough University awarded him an honorary doctorate, recognising his military service and achievements in mountaineering. Project Possible depended on an exceptional Nepali team, and Nims was its very visible leader. Since then, the 189-day mark has been surpassed, and the rules around the record have changed. But Project Possible still altered the scale and pace people believed an expedition could achieve. So this video is a tribute to the legendary Nirmal Nims Purja, the other 9 climbers on Broad Peak, and every climber who has ever lost their life on a mountain. They are the people brave enough to show the world that the impossible really is possible.
Nervous? No, I'm not at all. I was in the Gurkhas. There's a saying, if somebody says that he's scared of dying, either he's lying or he's a Gurkha.